Okay, so we are live. Hey, this is my fourth episode of our podcast. Today I have a guest, my friend Woody. He's from the US. He's a cognitive scientist and full stack developer. Um, he can also be known as Frymatic. So, Woody, why don't you take over and tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me, Danny. Honored to be one of the early guests on the podcast, whatever this turns into. Kind of excited. You always make cool stuff, so I'm sure this will turn into something interesting. Um, my name's Woody, aka Frymatic. Um, I am, as he said, a cognitive scientist. I went to school for that in University of California in San Diego, specialized in human computer interaction. And so it's only fitting that I met Danny through the computer space, Discord to be specific. We were in an artificial intelligence oriented server that later just became kind of a podcast oriented server run. It's not run by the guy, but it's dedicated to the podcast for Lex Friedman, an MIT machine learning or ex MIT machine learning professor. Very nice guy. He's Russian. I don't know. We miss him on Discord. I'm sure he's doing cool stuff because he keeps turning out neat videos with cool people. Um, yeah, so I am a 10-year alum of Silicon Valley. I worked in the startup space for most of my time there. I was not in an engineering capacity. I ended up at Google at a certain point. Definitely did some very early founding of companies, some successful, some not so much. Worked a lot in online community management, especially in the video game space. And in my time there, I realized, the only way I'm really going to do anything interesting, at least with respect to where my dreams were targeted, was to get into engineering. So I had an opportunity in 2018. Unfortunately, it's a little for a dark reason. My dad died, and I ended up moving back home. So took that time to get back to school and fill some gaps in my skills. And so I got into first I did mobile programming. I did this SDK called it's funny, it was called Corona. And then the pandemic came and they changed the name. It was based on Lua. It's pretty neat. Made some like funky little apps for well, basically anything. They worked on mobile, they worked on desktop, they worked on Apple TVs and Amazon Fire Sticks and stuff like that. But then I picked up Python, and that really kind of blew the lid off things for me. The Python class I took was a night school, just like once a week. It was a really long one. It was like a 5-hour class or something like that, but once a week. And it was enough for me to go like, okay, this is cool. Got to like right around that time, it was becoming the most popular language on the internet. And then also I knew it was kind of the underpinnings of AI as it stands right now. Everything in AI has got some hefty layer of Python in it. And so it's kind of like, all right, that one's interesting. So I took that class and the momentum I had from that and reached out to the local tech community. I was in the Sacramento area and found a group for Python developers. And so showed up, they were doing an in-person thing. This was before the pandemic had started. It was like the end of 2019. And got connected with a startup, did some stuff with them. Um, Ended up taking over the meetup because a few months into my membership there, the organizer of it just, he got a new job and he said, "Hey, I can't run this anymore. Will someone take it over?" And I was lined up to speak at that next meetup, so I was kind of like fell in my lap and been running it ever since. That was January 2020. Kind of saw the group transition through the pandemic from in person to online. We've done it on like Google Hangouts. We've done it or whatever they call it now, Google Meet. We've done it primarily on Zoom, and we've even done a few on Discord and maybe some others. It's been pretty fun. Since we've been online, the group has really expanded in terms of its membership. We've got people from the Bay Area, we've got people from the East Coast. We got people from New Zealand. Uh, have you joined? I feel like you've been on one or two, Danny. Um, anyway,
I,
um,
I, I actually haven't. I wanted to because there is a time zone difference. It's usually
yeah,
at 5 a.m. here, so I haven't
yeah,
get a chance to go there. But I believe it's really exciting, and if I get a chance to go there, I would definitely try to meet with you guys one time.
nice. Yeah, I've been thinking maybe it's worth doing one that's on like the other side of the clock. That way we can work with some friends on the other side. Because realistically, I guess the next point that I wanted to talk about, like what I've been kind of about lately, is hackathons. I'm wearing a shirt from a hackathon from early 2021. Um, hackathons has really opened up the sort of next level of connectivity for me. We did some hackathons together. We were in one that was UN World Innovation Day. We ended up we were runner up in that, right? We also did another that
Yeah,
we didn't
yeah.
really finish due to some health issues in the team. Um, that was with Microsoft. That was a pretty cool project. Maybe we should try to finish that at some point in the future. Whatever, we'll figure it out. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I've been really been doing a good amount of that. I think I'm doing maybe three or four of them a year. And it's been fun because pandemic required basically everything to be online. And so where we have like a traditional hackathon is, maybe a big auditorium or a series of rooms in a like physical location. People would travel and be around one another and compete with one another or against one another, all in person. But with the pandemic, you just do it in a Discord or a Slack or a Microsoft Team or something like that. And so the teams that I've been on are getting progressively more and more dispersed. So yeah, moving SacPy. Oh, that's that Python user group, SacPy. Moving SacPy so we could have something a little more reasonable for your schedule is probably not the worst idea because some of my teammates, well, they're in your time zone or even further away. We got one guy in Pakistan who's awesome, but yeah, it's a little rough to ask him to show up at 7 a.m. on a Friday. Um, yeah, Yes. Oh, also, I guess I should mention I've been running a company since the beginning of the pandemic too, Brazen Studios. I work with small companies. I work with startups, nonprofits. I work with artists. I work with military vets. We've been adding like a Python educational series where I've been teaching some guys from the Discord space Python. Um, one in particular, Greg Richer, is a U.S. Air Force vet, and he's been taken to it pretty nicely. Although I haven't seen him in a month, so what the heck, Greg? But yeah, so been enjoying my summer. Looking forward to getting back on the horse in the fall. Maybe work at the next blue chip gig. Um, Last one was Salesforce, so hopefully someone equally interested. Anyway, I could go on, but I think that's a pretty good primer on who's Woody slash Fragmented.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Um, yeah, so I guess we could go back to Lex Fridman's server because I have some of the friends who are currently actively engaging in Lex Fridman group on Telegram. So Lex Fridman, he organized this new kind of chat maybe a year ago or so. It was really active since the Discord one was basically dead. Just for me, I just checked it maybe half like 30 minutes ago, and people are still kind of active there a little bit, but it's definitely not what it used to be. But the Telegram chat, on the other hand, it's still pretty much alive. So maybe, and I think you joined the server before I did, so maybe you want to talk about that, maybe a little bit about the vibe that was going there, something interesting, because I think I met so many people, including you there, and many of our friends, that it was such a good community. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So Well, I don't know that I was much before you, but I do find those Discord servers or Discord communities really interesting, and I think it comes down to sort of like that unifying theme, and the unifying theme being this really nice, really intelligent person from MIT. I think he won like DARPA self-driving competition at some point. So like a just really accomplished guy, and then with this, I don't know, kind of message of love and all that he's sharing as he talks to just these amazing luminaries. I think the first time like saw him on his podcast, it was him talking to Elon Musk. And I was like, okay, this guy's talking to Elon Musk, and I watch it, and he's like, okay, this guy's really smart and asking really cool questions, but also being really nice. And Elon's sometimes a bit of a doomer on AI and whatnot, and sometimes not as much. But just to hear Lex reason through that, I was like, okay, this guy's pretty cool. And they had a link to the Discord on there, and that was like the first active Discord I had ever really been on. Friends would get on and use it for its primary design purposes, that being, sort of a separate video game chat channel. But this is the first one I got on, and, there's people that are just openly, like verbally debating. And they're debating about really interesting topics because, Lex is bent on the podcast, at least before he just made it like Lex Friedman. But at that time, it was Lex Friedman's artificial intelligence podcast. And so there's people talking about all manner of things AI oriented. And there were like really interesting people that came through there. I remember talking for a while with this guy, Grant Sanderson. He runs this channel called, I think it's Three Blue, One Brown, or Three Brown, One Blue, Three Blue, One
Yeah,
Brown.
three blue, one
Yeah.
brown. Hmm.
Yeah, and he has this awesome Python library called Manim. That's short for, or it's like a portmanteau of math animation. And then he just gives these really awesome descriptions of various like mathematical concepts. And he was on the podcast at some point with Lex and had a really interesting, well, just, that guy's just super smart, super, I don't know, energetic and kind and whatnot. And those really interesting descriptions of things. He had one really interesting, I keep saying really interesting, like, um, a great description of AI and like the whole doomer aspect of things is the analogy he used was compressed air in like a canister. And so AI right now is yet to be released from the canister. And when you open a canister of compressed air right away, like a whole bunch rushes out. But if you're far away from it, you barely even notice it rushing out. And then if you keep it open, it, runs out eventually. Maybe I'm not nailing the analogy quite as well as he did, but I thought that was a really interesting illustration of how, AI is not really something to be scared of just yet. Um, but yeah, like, I don't know. He always had these like Lex that has always had these poetic aspects of his publications, and so I really got first involved in the community through the poetry reading group. It was like a Saturday thing, and people would get on and read poems that they had written themselves, or in my case, I didn't really have much poetry, so I just read whatever. Sometimes people would be shy, and so I'd read their poems, or I'd just read one of my favorites from growing up. And it was really fun, but I think the the technical sides of that community were pretty fun too. There was one time in particular where I think it was 30, maybe 40 people were all in a voice chat, and Lex was in, and everyone's getting all excited. Everyone's all talking over one another like they do sometimes, and people are getting heated and they're swearing and whatnot. Lex is swearing himself, and he sort of halts the conversation at a certain point and says like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! All right, we got to make a rule here. If if it's okay if you get excited and you use swear words and whatnot. However, if that becomes the only thing you're saying, we've got to mute you." And so maybe the rule is something like you can say one F word per minute. If you say more than one per minute, we've got to server mute you for a certain amount of time. And I chimed in at that point. I was like, hey, we could make a bot for that. And it was kind of funny. He's like, oh, yeah, I mean, I guess, like, it'll give you a few months to do that. I was like, I don't know. I think we could probably do a little bit faster than that. It's like, all right, sure, well, go ahead. All right, I'll report back when it's ready, sir. He's like, okay, you do that. And I think you jumped on. I know Dylan, our good friend Dylan, jumped on. Do you remember Yup? Uh, he's an Israeli guy. I think he's in the IDF now. I haven't heard from him in quite some time, but he was on as well. We all like broke out and got into a separate channel, started searching around and finding voice channel bots and then finding good speech to text things and putting together some decent logic for how to do things and just generally working through the SDK for Discord. We cranked something out in like 18 hours. It was pretty funny when we're testing it. We're all on this one channel. Everyone's just dropping F-bombs every few seconds. Just F, F, F.
Wow, wow, cool. Yeah, that's really cool because you mentioned Grant Sanderson. I was watching his channel first, and then he posted that, hey, I was on this podcast with this Lex Friedman guy. You might as
Oh,
well check it out. And that's how I got to know Lex Friedman. I think it
well,
was one of the early episodes, like under first 100 or so. So that was really cool. I remember one time Lex posted the link to the Discord channel under one of his videos, and that's how I got there. Met, as you said, the community was awesome. I've never been on anything like that, like neither online or even in person. It had its own vibe, and yeah, that was really cool. Um, One cool thing I noticed that when you said that there was that problem when Lex said, "Hey, we wanna maybe mute you if you say more than one F word per minute or so."
yeah.
That's such an like entrepreneurial spirit. Like you see the problem and you kind of mark it and you come up with an idea to solve it. That's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I have fun with stuff like that. So, especially, I mean, once I got kind of familiar with Python and I realized, holy cow, everything's out there. Someone's already made something. It's just a matter of finding the little pieces and putting them together in a novel fashion. And I just have fun with it. Fun
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, that's cool. Um, so why don't we talk a little bit about our first hackathon together?
Yeah,
Was it the UN thing or was the Microsoft thing first? I don't remember.
that is a good
I think
question.
Microsoft.
It might have been Microsoft, yeah. So Microsoft, it was what, just the four of us? It was you, me, Dylan,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
BK. And then I wasn't actually competing. I was just kind of a mentor because it was like a school thing.
Like student. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
a student hackathon, and I was trying to figure out some interesting way to like get registered with the local community college, but it was too short of a time frame. But that was interesting. I think was it BK that was leading the group?
Yeah, yeah, it was his idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he had found some machine learning like repo on GitHub that was put together by some research group in Boston, I believe. Boston College or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. But it was for detecting it was de for detecting like tumors in like MRI scans of the brain. Am I
I
getting that
think it
right?
was related, like related to Alzheimer's, or
Yeah.
I might not pronounce it correctly. Yeah, the
Yeah,
disease.
yeah, that's right. But it was detection of some issue in like in the neurological space. And I mean, I it was a bummer we didn't finish, but also it's not that surprising. But I just loved like how ambitious that was. Like, so that was fun.
Yeah, yeah, it was awesome.
It was fun. And then like it got me to end up at a certain point I ended up calling a bunch of the people that were on the white paper or on the repo. Like I found them in the faculty or something. I asked them a bunch of questions where at the end of it I was like, man, I probably sound pretty dumb. But it was kind of cool because I ended up talking to them just because you guys were like, hey, could you ask these questions? And I don't think I would have talked to those people otherwise. But yeah, it was really neat. What happened though? I think Bertrand got like he just got sick
Yeah,
because he
he
stayed
he
up too
he
many
got
days.
really sick. I think the issue was he said it was an allergy, but it was really a bad one. He got hospitalized.
Yeah,
He recovered. He recovered in a month or so. But I think the problem was the guy just worked like 24/7 without
yeah,
stops. Like the ambition of this guy was just awesome. And I think the whole group, like you, Dylan, BK, even me a little bit, we were so excited about this, and not only this, like in general, to build stuff, to try new things, that the energy was exciting. But I think that there is also a downside to that, which you have to be aware of.
yeah. No, and not to knock BK or anything, but definitely in subsequent hackathons, I've used that as a cautionary tale. Like, look, no one's getting paid. Even if we win, it's not that much money. So, you know, get some sleep, go touch grass. You know, this isn't everything.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was the first one because I remember you were saying that on the UN hackathon, which we did eventually with like a bunch of people from different countries, different time zones. It was awesome. Do you think you remember anything of that? Maybe you can tell a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so I think I remember maybe we both got recruited at the same time, but we did get recruited through the Lex server. Eric Hamill was the one that contacted me. I think
Ah,
he saw that I was doing videos of some sort, possibly because of my Python thing. But he recruited me to do the video. And then you were working, had you done a boot camp or something like that? But you were working in Java or something.
yes, yeah, exactly.
And I think he had just finished something, some sort of online ML ops thing, and he was kind of excited to do something with that. And there was a group that he had gotten connected with out of France. I believe the guy's name is Luc Janvo, and he works for this firm called
Yeah.
Mott McDonald. I don't know that that was related, but he had the project that he had been working on, Echo Open, was this open source like ultrasound probe thing, and it's been going for 10 plus years. But he had that available to kind of like plug in with this whole idea of these like cheaper ultrasound probes. Now, who else ended up on our team? I think was Danielle on the team? I think she might have been.
Yes, yes, yes.
And she was
Yep.
helping with the business vision and whatnot. And was Joe, I think Joe L was on the team. He was doing kind of like project management.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, he was from Malaysia or Singapore, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, somewhere Southeast Asian. Yeah, that was who else was on that team? There were were there some others?
We had some people who were not as active. I
Well, that
think
happened.
I might be forgetting. Yeah, but I think you covered most of them.
Yeah, and so that one was pretty cool. I thought it was a really good submission for like a United Nations thing, because the United Nations is this big organization that's all over the world, but it doesn't have much power except for its ability to speak up on issues. So they put together these agendas, they put together these initiatives, and then they kind of lean on countries to do something about it. But I think the hackathon's really cool because you get to do it online, and then um, that allowed more nations to come together and do stuff with one another. But then, we were doing something directed at COVID, so I thought that was pretty pretty good way to address the problem they were looking at. And so we made a thing that it was based on this guy's open source project that he'd been working on forever, and then a market trend with ultrasound probes where things were getting cheaper, and then the problem of COVID, where we've got only so many people that are qualified to utilize an ultrasound probe. We could then not really replace them, but kind of supplement that workforce by offering this app, right? And it would, allow you to do the little ultrasound probe thing, and instead of having a what do you call it, like a certified technician, I think it takes 2 years to get certified, but a certified technician interpreting what's going on. Instead, we've got a machine learning toolkit. So there were a number of different ways that you could determine whether or not a person had COVID based on an ultrasound scan. There's like A lines and B lines and pleurisy, and I don't, I kind of forget. Pretty neat. I think there's a lot of other applications for it, but we just focused on the one in the interest of time and focus. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember that we also had like mentors, people who were in the hackathon, but they weren't part of the team. They were like helping separate teams with some specific items. I remember, I don't remember the name of the guy. I think he was from South Africa. He and some other person from like was it Google Cloud? No, I think it was Oracle Cloud.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
They they tried to help us to build this um, chart or something using their database. We were struggling to do that. And I remember I was trying to figure it out at 1 a.m. or something on Saturday night. Um, and we eventually did it. We figured it out, but it was awesome. We were just sitting on the Discord trying to work on something, and yeah, it was really exciting for me.
Yeah, it's fun when a whole bunch of people can kind of come together for, I guess a short period of time. I mean, it's nice when people can come together on anything, period, but these hackathons make it a lot more doable for people to just align for a brief, intense sprint on something. And it's pretty amazing what you can get done when you've got 3 or 4 people all focused on the same general problem. And then, everyone's kind of all in because we all know it's going to be done in just a few days.
Yeah, yeah. And you can meet so many like entrepreneurial or like people who have drive to do something, to build stuff, or just to have some curiosity to explore new things. It's such a great way to connect with people because with most of the people from even that team, I'm still connected on LinkedIn. We share stuff sometimes, and that's just awesome. Like how profound that was. Even if it was like 2 day marathon to build something, it was still like a big long term thing that still um, brings those connections. So yeah, that was really awesome.
Oh yeah, no, the bonds that are formed in those things are pretty permanent, I've noticed.
One thing you mentioned that that guy from France who was working on this open source project, he was obviously working on it for many years. And when I first heard about hackathons, I used to think that it was more of a you have to start from scratch and build something or some concept. But it seems like some of the hackathons do not require that. You can start with something and maybe show some progress that you did in a couple of days or so. Um, do you did you kind of look into that? Do you think that like you can like you have to start from something in some of the hackathons, or you can just use existing project in most of them?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. That definitely comes up when they're doing this sort of introduction to what hackathons are. I think Carl Sagan had a pretty good quote that's a little poignant. He says, if you'd like to create an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe, something absurd like that. And so I'd like to point to that whenever anyone's saying like, oh, you're not doing enough original work here. Um, that said, I think it's like the extreme end is okay, you just take some boxed product and it's maybe some white label thing, put some logos on it, fill up a little bit of data, and then turn that in as though you made something. That's definitely to be avoided. But you don't have to invent a whole new programming language in order to be able to produce something that's relatively original. So I think it's interesting when you can continue on a theme, maybe not the same exact product or service that you created before, but to be able to continue on a theme and maybe recycle some aspects of it, especially now that many of these hackathons are oriented to like machine learning or AI type stuff. There's a lot of reusability. Many are just going to be GPT type stuff. And so, do you really need to write a new class to wrap the OpenAI API? Probably not. But, if you're using the same exact prompts, well, that starts to be like, you're just showing us the work from a past one. But it's an interesting question because on the one hand, you know, how deep should you go on a project? Um, versus the other hand, where like how new does everything need to be every single time? It's an interesting question because at a certain point, like if you made something good and like say maybe you won with it, kind of makes sense to maybe stop doing hackathons and just work on that.
Yeah. So why don't you tell a little bit more about Brazen Studios, what it does, how did you come up with that? Because I've looked into that, but I haven't really dived in deep into that, and I'm curious a little bit to know.
Yeah. All right. So basically, I've been working on the design for a game that I'd like to make since 2009 or something like that. And in 2015, I started the Frymatic project, and I kind of put a flag in the ground and said to myself, okay, I'm going to start building this game, and I'm going to start building the game with what I understand so far. And so, what I understood about all of the industry surrounding producing a video game was in the um, was kind of in the like social media management, community management, marketing, user operations, those sorts of things. And so I just started building all of those things. Meanwhile, I was also keeping track of all my notes on what the game would be about, how certain features would work, certain, UI elements, things like that. And eventually it got to a point, well, the pandemic came around and I was in an interesting situation where my living expenses were lower because I was back home with mom after dad passed away. And then I was also in an interesting work environment where I kind of had free reign to do what I wanted, while working on all the projects they needed me for. Um, and so I thought to myself, well, I'm going to start the company aspect of this project that I'm working on. And eventually found some fairly novel ways to utilize the company, so that I'd orient my life towards, you know, my life's work, and also kind of do that in a fashion that addressed, um, taxes in a novel fashion. Because, you know, provided you're working on something that is company oriented, that's a business expense. And, some of the goals of, I don't know, being wealthy is travel a lot, see your friends, see interesting places in the world. And so I figured, why not just jump ahead to that and turn that all into business travel? And so I'm not just arbitrarily traveling and for pleasure. I'm showing up to my friends' places and saying, "What are you working on?" And then I'm applying my sort of hackathon slash entrepreneurial approach to things and saying, "Okay, let's build that." And then, maybe it's not exactly what they were imagining because, well, maybe they're imagining something that was impossible to build. That's why they hadn't built something. But I'll usually end up building something that's some weird, unexpected optimization or a whole new foundation for something. Um, and then it all just kind of goes into the toolbox for building this game. So now engineering skills are coming in. I'm getting pretty close now that I think it's about time to start building the game itself. Um, so we'll get there. But in the meantime, I do a bunch of work with small companies. A lot of companies have, bricks and mortar. They've figured out some service. Maybe they just do haircuts or they do eyelashes or they do massage or they run a yoga studio or they run an insurance shop. Many of them, while they've figured out their core business, they just don't want anything to do with some aspect of like the digital operations of the company. You could just call it IT at a certain level. Sometimes it's a matter of bookkeeping and managing their accounting software, or it's in the sales space and they just don't know what to do with respect to sales engineering. They don't know how to put their phones together, or it's just simple stuff like, hey, I'm hiring a new person. Could you help me put together their email and the rest of their accounts? Because you can do it a lot faster than I can. So I don't know. I've got dozens of contracts with little companies that I work with here and there. And I do basically, IT and data projects. And occasionally I get an interesting one like Lenovo or Salesforce. And, that funds the company for 18 months or so at a time.
Wow, wow, that sounds really interesting, especially that you have like contracts with big companies. Is it still the same problem that they lack some digitalization, or is it something else that they want some help with?
So when I was at Salesforce, I was working on their mergers and acquisitions team. I was primarily focused on the Slack acquisition. And the reason they had focused on my profile for that one was my work in chatbots. So Slack has a bot platform, and Salesforce is a CRM thing. Most of my career has been in CRM. And then when I got into Python for like small businesses, most of what I do is I'd make chatbots. So it's kind of a match made in heaven. I'm hoping for the next one. But yeah, I was doing the engineering there. Um, did a good amount of Python. I was mostly focused on Node.js code bases, which was interesting because I didn't really have much Node.js experience. But once you've learned a few languages, picking up a new one's not the end of the world. So yeah, it was fun. I came up with a whole, in the end, I
Yeah,
think it turned in like a dozen different bot ideas and it was pretty fun.
yeah, that's really cool that you mentioned it because just a couple of days ago I learned that Slack was purchased by Microsoft at some point. I didn't know that. I thought that they are
Salesforce.
still their own company.
No,
Yeah.
they were
Oh,
purchased by
Salesforce.
Salesforce. Yeah,
Wow. Because someone said that it was Microsoft, but you should know better.
I'm pretty
Oh,
sure it's Salesforce. Yeah.
yeah. So, So it was during the time then they were kind of merging things together. They acquired Slack. They wanted to somehow integrate their systems between them, or is that something that you were working on, or was it something else?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was primarily focused on the one of the bots that they had that was kind of working inter-product there. It was called Lead Pass Bot. And we were starting to get into developing a bot for the C-suite that was oriented to just kind of optimizing the M&A process. Also found some interesting opportunities with their federal contracting status. Found a blank check for a thing. Unfortunately, that didn't really work out, so I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, it was mostly just like bots and then that acquisition. I did work on some of the other acquisitions too. Did a big ETL for this one. That's extract, transform, load. If anyone needs ETL work, I'm your guy.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, that sounds really interesting. Um, you mentioned AI a couple of times. That was part of the reason why you joined the Lex Fridman community in the first place. So, do you have a chance to work with AI in these projects, or maybe as hackathons, as hobbies, anything?
Yeah, so where was I? Everyone knows about GPT. It's an LLM, large language model. Um, so yeah, I've been on the team in two different GPT oriented hackathons. I was also on the team in two other LLM hackathons. Um, One was, I guess, kind of GPT-ish, but was Paul. Google was the sponsor. I guess Google was the sponsor for two of them, but they were offering Palm or Palm 2, their LLM. And so let's see. The first one was with the group that I met from Discord, and then from like the Twitter EAC community, like Effective Acceleration group. And we put together a team, and they gave it the cheeky name Kwisatz Haderach, which is a reference to the novel and now movie series Dune. And we made a product that we called Mentat, which was kind of funny because I hadn't quite gotten to the earlier books in the series, so I didn't quite understand how well chosen that name was. But basically, what we made was a sort of AI tutor that would help you to structure a sort of PKM space, a personal knowledge management space. And implemented a we implemented a methodology called Zettelkasten, and I feel like maybe I just said that way too much in the video because ultimately what we made was pretty awesome. But we didn't end up in the winner's circle on that one. That was with a Swedish group called LabLab.ai, and we actually did another one later. After that, I did GPT for Good, and that was the theme for the World Innovation Day hackathon. That was no longer directly sponsored by the UN, but it was continued by the hackathon group called Hackmakers, the group based out of Australia. And we actually won that one this year. We got gold. And so we've kind of tried to
Oh,
continue that
cool.
one on.
Congrats.
We called ourselves GPT Squad. We've kind of changed the name since then because it hasn't been all GPT hackathons. I think we're just ML Squad, something like that. I figure that's probably the best, most focal name because this is all machine learning. I don't know about calling it AI. And then GPT, well, that's just one company's ML Squad. But yeah, the product that we won with that for the UN hackathon or the whatever World Innovation Day hackathon, we called it Special Victims Mentor. Um, we kind of focused on that area because when we were looking at who won in the past, there were usually two main topics. One was really science heavy and usually by some research organization with a big name, MIT or Caltech or uh, Berkeley or Stanford would win. And then what they'd turn in was some climate change oriented solution where they're doing all this wild stuff, tracking carbon footprints and things like that. Um, And so I figured we were a bit of a ragtag team. Danielle from that initial UN hackathon, she put us together. Now she's out in Yaoundé, Cameroon, in Africa, and she put together a team with myself, and then a guy Zane based out of Pakistan, another guy Federico based out of Mexico. She found this other guy out of Brooklyn, and then I recruited my like podcast host, also out of California. But we were like all over the place, and I figured, yeah, we're not really going to be able to compete with a team that's got mentors that are the professors and stuff like that. So instead, we'll go for the other category. And the other category was usually some like women's rights category, or women's rights problem and solution pairing. And so one of my projects, I'm helping out a person who falls in the special victims category. I can't talk too much about what they're doing because I have an NDA, but hopefully be able to change that at some point. But basically, we found this group, a non-governmental organization called End the Backlog. And they have all these crazy stats on how many what are called rape kits or forensic medical um, reports. And in the US, there's just like over 100,000 rape kits that have still been untested. And so we thought, okay, well, if you give GPT focused enough prompt, you can get some pretty interesting answers. And so we gave it the prompt like, hey, I had the rape kit that a rape kit was tested on this date in this location. Give it a prompt oriented towards like, what can I do? What are my windows of opportunity to speak up in terms of the judicial process? And it would spit out a JSON object that had a whole bunch of calendar objects for Google Calendar, links to things that will allow you to see what the like statute of limitations was and put it on the schedule so it's visualized. So they like that. Um, we we did the thing where we applied that to a subsequent hackathon and didn't do quite as well. Uh, I think that had a little bit more to do with the fact that we had some issues with the team. Like our captain Danielle, her internet was knocked out for 3 of the 4 days. One of the guy in Mexico, his family had an emergency, and then there were some other outages throughout the whole thing. So it's just, I don't, it's mayhem. And then what other ones have we been in? We did one for like cardiac health with the electrocardiograms. I was just the mentor in that one. And there's a few others coming up that I think should be pretty interesting. I'm really excited about the NVIDIA hackathon, and that's in June. No, not June. What am I saying? That's behind us. It's a time travel hackathon. It'll be great. No, no, it's in November. So I think registration for that's coming up soon, but I don't know. So it's been fun doing AI stuff. I wouldn't call it AI. It's just like the best new ML thing. I'm excited about some other ML things coming out or things that have been reported upon, but there aren't any like good products for it just yet.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Yeah, I actually seen the video that you guys submitted for the UN, the World Innovation Day Hackathon. I really thought that it was a really good like problem solution fit because as you mentioned, the problem with rape kits is enormous and you managed to find the solution using this chat GPT or LLM boom that we have now, and it was really creative, and I think it deserved its first place. So it was really great.
Thanks.
Um, yeah, we still have this a little bit of a problem with connection. It should be good at the end, but I'm losing you at the times.
Huh.
Um,
Well, we're coming up on an hour. I don't know how much more time I have. So, if there's any other questions on your list that are pressing, I'd say let's get to them. And otherwise, I gotta go fairly soon.
I think we could end now because like we covered I think most of what I wanted to discuss, and it was really cool. So,
Cool.
yeah, man, maybe just wrap it up now. And yeah, it was really cool. I really glad to talk to you, man.
Yeah, and hey, anytime. These are always fun.